Morning, church. It's good to be here, And we've had, the last month or so, it's been really awesome seeing and just observing what God's doing. And if you're here this morning, you're a visitor or haven't been for a few weeks, we've been sort of unpacking a little bit on the spiritual realities, what they look like, what the demonic is, how it operates, and who we are, what authority we carry, and how we are to sort of approach it. And so last week, it's been like Renee shared, and it was a fantastic testimony of God's forgiveness and power and His transforming power, right? And how even when we carry shame and guilt, how God can, when He speaks, it can flip it and it can change it, and how He can completely just restore us. And so I encourage you, to have a listen to a testimony. I believe it's still online, but she shared around an abortion she had when she was way younger, and before she even had a faith, and then the impact of that, and then what God did in terms of restoration. It was stunning. But it's and also I shared about familiar spirits, how things can be in our family lines, and ways in which patterns of behaviour, and how those things can be actually, they can have a spirit attached to them. And they become so familiar that we don't even recognise it, that it's the enemy, because it's just, that's just the way my parents and that's just how they operated, isn't that the way it is? And how God, and basically how to identify that and break that. So I don't want to go back there, but I just want to encourage you. And lastly I had a lot of feedback about this. We shared about that word, New Testament word, possession, what that actually means. And we often there's a real fear around that word, and we wonder what that means. And so it doesn't mean ownership, but it means influence, that we come under, a part of our lives can come under the influence of the demonic. And so, again, if that's something that you want to find out more about, please, have a look at, listen to online last week. But so this morning, I just want to encourage you that, we live in a world, right, where there are two kingdoms. There is the kingdom of heaven, and there is the kingdom of Satan. And he is diametrically opposed to us. He wants to take us out. His destiny is absolutely confirmed, and it's that he knows that one day he's going to be destroyed. And so he just wants to take as many of us with him. And so you can't play with the demonic. They want to take us out. And actually, it speaks of in John 10:10. It says that he's like a roaring lion, that he seeks to kill, steal, and destroy. And so he wants to take us out. If he can't take us out physically, then he wants to take out our faith. And if he can't take out our faith, he will try and take out your calling, your destiny, your purpose in life. That's his sole intention. And what's cool is that actually, I think of World War II when I think of the cross, and that actually the cross was the moment where his power and authority was broken, that it was like the decisive battle. And it's a bit like, if you know a little bit of history of World War II, when they did the landings in Normandy, right? I think Churchill was like, this is the beginning of the end. It was like at that moment when that beachhead was established, when it was sealed, it sealed the fate of Nazi Germany, that it was doomed. The battle still went on, but it was the decisive moment. We were chatting about it. Beth was saying, it's a bit like Xbox, when you're playing Xbox, or we don't, but when we see the boys playing, and you're up against a boss, right, and they've got their little energy sort of thing, and you can see as you fight them, their energy sort of goes down. But it's like the decisive hit was taken, right? And his fate is known. But we're still in a battle. We still got to fight the enemy. We still spiritual reality is very real. In fact, when Jesus left, when he was about to ascend, before he went to the cross, he prayed for the disciples, and he said, Lord, I pray that you would strengthen them, that their faith would hold, that they would be strengthened through the trials. And so and he was speaking actually not just to the disciples, but to us as well. So there is a real battle, but we know that the key battle the decisive battle has been won. And it's quite cool. So when he sent out the 72 disciples, and he sent them out to share the good news, right? And it said that he delegated authority to them, that they would heal the sick, they would deliver people from the demonic, and to preach. When in Luke 10:17-20, this is their response, right? The 72 returned with joy and said, Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name. And he replied, this is Jesus, he said, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions, to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. However, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. And so I want to encourage you with that, because there's this delegation that goes on right through Jesus' ministry, and at the end, when it took the Great Commission, he delegates and that authority, and he commands us to go out and to heal the sick, and to cast out demons, and to spread the good news. And these guys, they saw that, right? They're like, wow, they saw this happening. And Jesus said he sees Satan fall like lightning from heaven in response. And so there were two ways to interpret that. One is that actually what the disciples did, and as they continued Jesus' ministry, right, they dealt further blows to him, right? And Jesus is he's using that example, and he's prophesying the final doom of Satan, that in Revelation, when he returns, he's going to finally deal to them. So it's like we carry God's authority, and we can actually deal, damage to his kingdom, to Satan's kingdom. And the other way to interpret it, and I think both are valid and both are true, is that he reminds them here, it's actually Satan fell to heaven, and he fell because of pride. And so it's like a reminder to the disciples, hey, don't get pride about what you carry. Actually, it is not you, it's the authority you carry, which is the power of the Holy Spirit. Right? And so it's actually God doing the work, it's not us. But we are partnering with him. We carry his authority and his power, and we see breakthrough in people's lives. And so it's not something to get proud about. That was the downfall of Satan himself. But it is to actually, we're to celebrate and just be so thankful that our names are written in the book of life, that we have eternity. We know where we're going. So I want to encourage you, because I was listening to Derek Prince. I've been reading around. He's a great teacher, right? And he's a highly rated one, and he observed that over the years, many Christians have dabbled in the occult. They've got involved in it, and there's a sort of a fascination with it. And he put it down to this. He said that many have been exposed to religion, or exposed to church life, right, that is primarily intellectual and material. So it's just social and moral sort of in character. But they don't see the power of Jesus' name demonstrated in their midst. And so there's this hunger in us to see, we want to see change, we want to see transformation. And I guess my encouragement to you is it's real. That actually his name has power. His name has authority. Fortunately, I believe that statement that Derek Prince was saying, that it's just a moral and an intellectual thing, faith, that gets modelled at times through churches. I don't think that's true here. Actually, we see God move in power. We expect and we pray for things, and we see God move. And so this morning, actually, we've got a testimony that Rachel and Meredith want to give, just from only a few weeks ago, of God moving in power.
Morning. So we were having issues, weren't we, Meredith? Meredith was having really bad headaches for probably the last year, and initially when she started complaining about them, I just thought, oh, you haven't had enough water, drink more water. And then I started thinking, oh, maybe it's to do with like growing pains, but it was quite debilitating at times. Like there were quite a few nights in the week where she'd just go to bed early because she was feeling so bad about it. And it was about 4 weeks ago, I think, she said to me one night, it was quite bad, and she was in tears, and I was like, how often are you having the headaches, Meredith? And she was saying, Mum, I have them most nights. And so I was like, oh no, this isn't sounding good. And I went to bed and I was like, oh. And I was thinking, what could it be? What could it be? I'm going to have to take her into the doctor and get her checked out. And then I remembered that about a year before, which would work time-wise, she had a big fall off some hay bales, and she kind of fell onto her, your shoulder and the back of her neck. And she was quite shook up about it at the time and quite hurt, but she didn't appear to have so we thought any permanent damage. And it would have been roughly about a year before, and that's sort of when she started having the headaches. So I'll be honest, my mind went straight to the physical, like, oh, she's damaged something in there, so we'll take you into the doctor and get some scans, get you looked at. But then we came to church on Sunday, and I thought, oh, we'll just get some prayer, just in case. And so Michael and I brought her up the front, and Roger came up and had a word for her and prayed for her. And what happened?
Jesus healed me.
So the next morning I said to her, did you have a headache last night, Meredith? And she said, no. And then the next day I said, did you have a headache, Meredith, last night? And she said, no. And it's been about 4 weeks now, and how many headaches have you had?
None.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Meredith. You have to be pretty brave to come up. But that just shows you, so there's power in his name. And actually, we've got to appropriate that. We've got to position ourselves to take that on and to walk in it. And I feel like God is, over the last few weeks, or actually probably longer than that, but there's been like a bit of a purifying and a refining and a setting people free from things that in the past have created restrictions. So we've seen a lot of people have had prayer ministry around the Masonic Lodge and around history there, like if parents, grandparents have been involved, or if you yourself has been involved, that actually God is in the sort of the process of exposing that and just breaking the curses that are involved in that occult, really, and he is setting people free from the restrictions of those things. And so, so I just want to encourage you that actually we've got to get on the front foot, and it's just simple obedience. Hudson Taylor, he wrote once. He was a missionary who went to China and spent his whole life as a missionary in China, and in the 19th century, so that's like in the 1800s sort of thing. And he was the founder of the China Inland Mission. And he said this, that I used to have a clear vision of what I was going to do for God, but I don't know now. I just trust him. And I thought, that is so cool. Like, when we're young, we can have all these passions and we got a vision and we're kind of running to, and we're doing X, Y, Z. And it's like, the older he got, this guy, it was like the less he worked out, the less he kind of knew what he was doing. And the more he just simply trusted, the more he just went with obedience. He just flowed with what God was doing. And he had an incredible, impacted millions, an incredible ministry. And just, he moved on trust. And so I want to encourage you, so an example of that was Roger. He had a sense, had a word, and he thought, man, I know he shared, it was like, man, how do I pray for a 10-year-old who I don't know? Like, it can be a bit intimidating. And he looked up and he saw Meredith and Rachel walking up to the front, and just thought, that's it, that's my in. Ran up there, prayed, gave the word that he had, and just that simple obedience, right, partnering with God was just flowed through to a healing. And so this is what it looks like. So Hebrews 5:14, it says this, but solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves, to distinguish good from evil. So the distinguishing of good and evil is discernment. That's the gift, right? That's what we call discernment. It's discerning what's going on in a situation. And so what it's saying there is that it's solid food is for the mature. And listen to this, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. So solid food is talking about the Word of God. That actually we've got to know the Word. We've got to read it. We've got to, if you want to begin to have a high level of discernment, to be able to, for your own life, right, and also for other people's lives, to discern between just the flesh, what's our own ideas, what's God ideas, and actually what's demonic, what's Satan's ideas, then we've actually got to start eating that solid food. We've got to know the Word. And so I really encourage you that it's a real simple thing, right, but so basic that sometimes we sort of forget about it. And then the second part there is like we've got to practice it. We've got to step out. Like if you want, it doesn't drop into you. It's something that you've actually got to walk it out and actually take risks. And that's only when you step out and you start operating and you test it. That's when you find out if you hit it on the nail or you made a mistake. But there's this constant, the word there, constant use. So I just want to encourage you that actually, we live in this world where there's this battle, right? And if we want to sharpen ourselves up, then we've got to just continue to step out or start stepping out. And just in obedience, in trust. It's not what we know, it's a heart position, as Hudson Taylor's was said there in that quote. So, an area that I guess I really want to speak into this morning is I want to link what rebellion looks like to witchcraft and how there's a spectrum. And then I want to link that to unforgiveness. And so that's sort of where we're headed, and show just how unforgiveness is just like we have familiar spirits. We've talked about that. We've talked about the dabbling in the cult, and particularly around the Masonic Lodge. Well, this is another area, like another access point, another doorway that the demonic can have influence in our lives. And it's around forgiveness. It's around unforgiveness. And so that's where we're going. And so to preempt that, you see, if our faith is just theory, right, if there's no real power in the name of Jesus, then if that's sometimes we don't think that, right, but often in our heart we may feel like that. So the question I have for you, if you don't think that there is true power in Jesus, then who's going to protect you? Like, who's going to look after you? Who's got your back? Who do you trust? So we're gonna find some other means, right? And so that was the test right back in Genesis, where it was like, does Adam and Eve, do they choose to trust God? He's going to lead them and guide them, or are they going to eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge and evil, of good and evil? And so are we just going to make our own decisions? Are we going to find some other source on which to make decisions in our lives? And so it comes down to this question of control, right? We want to have control, right? We want to have security. We want to know that we're okay. We want a sense of safety in our lives. And if we don't believe that God has got our back, that His name has power, right, then we're gonna choose to protect ourselves. And often the root of that is fear. It's a fear of something, a fear of a situation. And there's a great story, really, that sort of encapsulates this, and that's the story of Saul. And it's the story where it led to his actual downfall as being the king. He was appointed by Samuel to be the first king of Israel, and he came from an insignificant family. And so with that, there was a real fear. He had a fear of man. He thought he was nothing. And that fear sort of pervaded his as a leader, his life. He never got through it, and never got over it, he never won that battle. And the consequence was that he got taken out. And so it's in 2 Samuel 15. And so what happens, right, is Samuel comes to Saul and he says, you know what, I want you to take out the Amalekites. I want you to take out the city of Amalek. And he wants them, it was like a real clear directed word. And it was like, I want you to take them out completely. I don't want you to keep anything. I want all of the animals in that city to be destroyed. And so he's like, okay, great. And it's interesting, he wasn't fearful of the battle, right? So he went in and he fought this battle. He musters Israel up and he goes in to fight the battle. And like I say, he was told very clearly not to take anything. And this is what happened. We're going to join it in 2 Samuel 15, 7-9. It says, then Saul attacked the Amalekites all the way from Havilah to Shur, near the eastern border of Egypt. He took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive. And all his people he totally destroyed with the sword. But Saul and the army spared Agag, and the best of the sheep and cattle, the fat calves and the lambs, everything that was good. These they were unwilling to destroy completely, but everything that was despised and weak they totally destroyed. So isn't that interesting, right? So he was told to get rid of everything. And then Saul doesn't. He destroys everything that is weak and they despise, that they didn't want. But he keeps the king alive, and he keeps the best of the stock and the animals and things like that. right? And so this is what happens. He goes to Samuel, jump forward a little bit, and he goes, when Samuel reached him, this is verse 13, Saul said, "The Lord bless you. I've carried out the Lord's instructions." And Samuel says this. He goes, "Oh, well, what then is the bleating of sheep in my ears? What is the lowing of cattle that I hear?" And Saul answered, "Oh, the soldiers brought them from the Amalekites. They spared the best of the sheep and cattle to sacrifice to the Lord your God, but we totally destroyed the rest." Can you see what he's doing? Like, he starts to water things down. He's like, "Oh, no, we did everything you commanded. We've brought back the best. And do you know what, Samuel? It's so we can sacrifice it all to the Lord." And so Samuel, as the chief priest, right, that means he would receive a portion of the sacrifice. So this is going to benefit Samuel. He's going to get a few of some nice fresh meat to eat. And so he starts to twist the instructions and what he's doing, and he's trying to compromise Samuel even, and that he'll go, "Oh yeah, okay, fine, fair enough. You did do better anyway." But Samuel holds the line, right, and he's like, "No, the instructions were really clear, Saul. I want you to destroy. It was to destroy everything, to kill the king." And everything in that city. And actually, Saul, again, he pushes back a second time, and he says, no, it's we've done that. We've kept the best to sacrifice. And Samuel pushes again, and he really hits the wall, I guess, and he spells it out to Saul exactly what's going on. And it's a very famous little part of the passage here in verse 22. And Samuel replied, "Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice. To heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination or the sin of witchcraft, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king." And then Saul said to Samuel, "I have sinned. I have violated the Lord's command and your instructions. Here, I was afraid of the men, so I gave in to them." So, what happens here, right, is Saul, when he starts to walk it out his faith, the pressure comes on. It's interesting, the pressure didn't come from the enemies. The pressure came from people in his army. And they're like, "Saul, this seems ridiculous. Why would we destroy all this good stuff? Surely it'd be a good thing to keep them." And so he's fearful. Instead of holding the line and saying, "No, this is what the Lord wants," right? He protects himself. And he caves to them. And then he tries to manipulate Samuel. He tries to change step back. So what did he do? He rebelled against God. He chose not to do what God asked him to do. And in that rebellion, he starts to manipulate truth to try to water it down, and to get his way, and to not expose his rebellion. And so that's where Samuel says here, "For rebellion is like the sin of divination, is like the sin of witchcraft." So what's going on here is so when we don't trust God, right, we try to save ourselves. And so we save ourselves. We start off just by rebelling. We just do it in the flesh, right? That's the first thing we do. We can rebel, and we go, "Nah, stuff it. I'm going to do my own thing." And if that doesn't work fully, then we start to manipulate, and we start to change the truth. We start to modify it. We try to blame other people, and we do that especially when the person who we're dealing with, we perceive them to have more authority than than us. They're like, if we can't just tell them this is how it's going to be, then we tell half-truths. We start to manipulate, right? But if we're in a place where we think, actually, I have more power than you, then what we do is we bully and we intimidate and we just stand over them. We just go, no, stuff you. No, this is the way it's going to be. And so rather than just manipulate, we sort of move across the spectrum and we dominate them. And so that's all the flesh. So that's why. And so why do we dominate? Because we're trying to twist and trying to get our way. We've got an opinion that's higher than their opinion. We think we're right. And so we twist the situation and we dominate. And, that's what sometimes it might be a threat, veiled. Like it's not going to go well for you if you don't agree with what I'm saying. Maybe we even we imply bad things are going to happen. Sometimes we can just straight out bully. Hey, we try to force our will on them. Now, if all of that fails, right, we can tap into the spiritual. And so that's what witchcraft is. Witchcraft is we look to supernatural means to manipulate and to get our way. And so we can, sometimes even as Christians, we have to be careful about our prayers, where we want a certain way, and from leaders or governments or whatever. And we can start praying, no, this is the way it's got to be. This has to be the decision. And we want an outcome better, more than what they do. And so that's witchcraft, right? That's manipulation. And I've found at times when I'm thinking, and God won't respond to that. But the better way to pray is like, Lord, I just stand with that leader. Lord, I pray you give them the wisdom to make that decision. Lord, I don't know the full scenarios of what's going on, but I pray, Lord, you would help them, provide them with the truth that they need. And we can pray in that way. But sometimes we don't. Sometimes we can be quite manipulative in our prayers. And then there's where we can actually tap into the occult and which is through seeking knowledge outside of God to advantage us or to twist or harm someone else. And ironically, if you read the story of Saul, that's where he gets to. He was called by God. He was anointed to be the king. And at the end, he ends up dabbling in witchcraft. He asks a medium to call up Samuel. He wants to know the outcome of the battle. And so that's the gradient. And that's why Samuel is saying rebellion is as like witchcraft. So when we don't obey, right, we fall into manipulation. We fall into rebellion. And why is that? Because at the deepest level, it's like we don't trust God with the outcome. And so we think we've got to save ourselves. We've got to manipulate the situation. We've got to get the outcome that we want. And that's, if you think about unforgiveness, that's what that is. When we hold on to unforgiveness, we are not trusting God to protect us and to help us. We are making this assumption that when we hold on to forgiveness, well, that is our protection. That'll ensure that this thing won't happen again in our lives. And so we hold back. And in a sense, it's a form of rebellion. It's a sense of, actually, God, I'm not going to trust you in this situation. I'm going to take matters into my own hands and stuff them. I'm going to hold on to my hatred and to my my grievance about what has happened. And so, and that's how we can manipulate a situation when it comes to unforgiveness. But the amazing thing is that in Joel 30, it says this, that that whoever calls upon the Lord shall be saved. If we are prepared to actually surrender ourselves and go, God, I give up my right to work it out. I call it, you save me, you deal with the situation, you heal my heart. Lord, you protect me going forward. That when we come to a place of where instead of trying to save ourselves, that where we surrender, actually we position ourselves to be saved by Him. There's a famous passage in Matthew 18 where Jesus, he spoke about this question of unforgiveness. And so I want to just read you through this. It's a sobering reality, right? And it shows that actually if we don't unforgive, we open the door of torment into our life when we don't forgive. But I do believe there's grace. When things happen, I know for me, sometimes it takes us a while, right, to be able to deal with the deeper the grievance, the deeper the unforgiveness. God realizes the hurt in our hearts and the damage it's done, and His desire is to restore us, is to make us whole, to set us free from the what's happened, that it would not become something that would frame our future and define our future. And so He gives us time. But needless to say, He's still, the command is ultimately to forgive. And so He gives this incredible picture here in Matthew 18. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? And Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. And therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 bags of gold was brought to him. And since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all he had be sold to repay the debt. So just pause there, 10,000 bags of gold. Like, that is an enormous sum of money. And it sort of shows that not even, no one, even in today's currency, house is worth 10,000 bags of gold. And so this is something that there's just no way he could pay that debt. And in that culture, the man the wife and children were under him. And they were his responsibility. They were his ownership as such. And so that's why they was, the threat was, well, they're going to go into slavery as well to pay off the debt. So it meant, it was everything there. And since he was not able to pay, at this, the servant fell to his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I will pay back everything. The servant's master took pity on him, cancelled the debt, and let him go. It's interesting. It wasn't like, okay, pay the debt, sell the house, pay off what you can, and I'll let you go. Or he didn't say, here are the strings attached. It was just like he had pity on him, he had mercy, and he gave him this. He gave him freedom. He cancelled the debt completely. So his family was still free. He still had a house. It's like an unconditional grace. And so, it speaks of salvation, right? It speaks of what Jesus was about to do on the cross. But when the servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins compared to 1,000 bags of gold. He grabbed him and he began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, be patient with me and I will pay it back. The same thing that he pleaded with the king. But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what happened, they were outraged and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant. "You wicked servant," he said. "I cancelled all the debt of yours because you begged me. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I have had on you?" In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat you, each of you, unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart. See, when we don't forgive, actually we're rebelling. We're rebelling against God. If we don't think that that outcome, that He has the best intentions for us, at the end it's like, well, if I'm not prepared to forgive, ultimately I'm saying I don't really trust you, God. I don't really trust that your ways are better than my ways. I'm going to choose my ways now. And there's a direct link here. Like, this is Jesus saying, he's like, man, when you refuse, you see, it's this spiritual law, right, that we reap what we sow. In Galatians 5, 7 and 8, it says, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please the flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction." Wow. "Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit he will reap eternal life." Like, that isn't, like, it can't be more clear than that, eh? Like, so he's saying, choose life, right? If you choose to please the Spirit, you will reap life. Even if we can't figure it out, even if we don't know what it looks like. You see, forgiving doesn't mean that the trust with that other person is restored, that friendship's restored. That takes two people, right? So it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean we're just buddies with that person. But what it means is that we give up our right to get even. We give out our right for vengeance. We say, God, you know the full situation. You know why they made the decisions they made, the actions that they made. You deal with them. And I surrender my opinions and my anger and my hatred to you. I lay it down and you deal with them. That is what forgiveness is. It's handing them to the Lord and asking Him to deal with them. And so it's actually man, it really frees us. My experience is that when I have done that, and sometimes it's taken me 6 months where I have to continue to, I have to keep praying, I have to keep forgiving them. It's an act of will. But as I do that, healing comes in my heart, and restoration. Those things no longer define, and I no longer feel like I have to protect myself. Actually, God, you've got my back. I can trust you. And so when we don't do it, though, it's actually I was talking to Teresa about it, and she put it like this. It's like, okay, so my choice before me is, do I choose to forgive or do I choose torment? I've never heard someone give it like that, and I thought, wow, like that, man, that's like it is in my best interests to forgive, and I'm essentially choosing torment if I don't. Derek Prince shared, he was talking about, he's seen people with arthritis radically healed when after they'd forgiven. And he made the point, see, arthritis is, like every move that you make, it's like, isn't it? It's like, they say it's like needles in the joints. And actually, does that sound like torment? Like, that sounds like torment, isn't it? Like, every move you make, it's like pain. And so the tormentors, right, so it's not that God is trying to inflict pain on us. It's that this is a spiritual law. It is a spiritual law that of reaping and sowing that governs the spiritual world. And when you think about it, man, I know for me, quite often it's only when things get painful that I deal with stuff. Like I know in our relationship, marriage, It's like sometimes we can refuse to to deal with something until it just becomes like, am I going to deal with this, or am I going to live the rest of our lives, with that dysfunction? And you think, no, okay, even though this is going to hurt, it's worth talking through. It's worth dealing with it. So humanity is a bit like that, and so pain is often God's megaphone, right? And so it's like when things don't go well, it often causes us to deal with stuff. And so it's a spiritual law. And so could I encourage you that one of the first things that when we're praying for people, we ask people, hey, is there anybody that you harbour unforgiveness towards? Is there anybody who is that hates you or harbours unforgiveness towards you? Have you dealt with that? Have you tried to, as much as you can, to reconcile that? Unforgiveness is, through what Jesus is saying here, is a direct doorway, a potential opening, right, to a demonic attack and demonic influence in your life. And so, I know we've shared a number of times Troy's story, and so I don't want to share that again here, but here's another one, and another common pattern that Derek Prince has noticed. Mental illness is another very common affliction that when people have forgiven and have really laid those things down, often they see a real breakthrough from mental illness. So that is not saying that mental illness and or arthritis, right, that the sole source of those things are unforgiveness. But what we are saying is that it can be the source. It can be a root of those things. And so, so this morning, I just want to encourage you with that, is that do that due diligence for yourself. Is there anything in your life? Do you notice? Is there anybody that you need to just to forgive? And we'd love to pray for you around that. As the team come up, as they finish, I just want to encourage you, don't give them a foothold. Don't give them a foothold into your life through unforgiveness. Keep short accounts. It is one of the primary areas that the enemy can get an access into your life. And with that, self-hatred is one of the most common things, where we're like, I can't believe I allowed that thing to happen. I can't believe that I did that. I can't believe I screwed up so badly. We can really speak curses over ourselves, and also not forgive ourselves for past things. And it's one of the hardest things to do, is to forgive ourselves in some of these situations where we've made mistakes. And actually, it's a real common thing to have to deal with. And so, again, I encourage you that Matthew 18 says that is a doorway to demonic influence. Like, if you think you're worthless, if you think you're no good, if you think that you have, you're undeserving of His love, then if God doesn't violate your free will, then how does He get through that? He's given us free will. So He wants us to deal with the roots. He wants us to deal with the stuff. Not because He wants to expose anything, but He wants you to not walk the rest of your life with a limp. He wants you to run and not grow weary. He wants you to be able to walk in the fullness and the joy and the full expression of the giftings and the calling that He has for your life. And so, just as I thought this 3-4 weeks ago, right, Meredith just was like, pray. She just was open for someone to pray for her, even though I know it would have been quite scary. She didn't have a big connection with Roger, but it took a lot of courage for her to come up and to get prayer and to allow someone to pray for her. But that's what childlike faith looks like. simple obedience. It's just like Hudson Taylor, just trust him. Trust him. And when you trust him, that brings real freedom and breakthrough. So I just encourage you this morning, if anything that I've said, that you would like to, if you want to get a copy of the Masonic Lodge, the curses, the prayers, we've still got more copies of those. If you want to